Venezuela's been a very bad actor. They've been, as you know,
Tensions in the Caribbean have escalated, risks have grown, and neither side is backing down. The U.S. administration has deployed 10 F-35 fighter jets to the Caribbean and put limited strikes against potential cartel targets on the table. This air power move, combined with its naval presence in the area, has sharpened its deterrence message. Of course, there was a reason for this striking naval move by the U.S. Among these reasons were Venezuela's signals of retaliation and initiating the first strike. A few days before the F-35s arrived in the region, 2 Venezuelan F-16 made a provocative flight near the USS Jason Dunham destroyer belonging to the U.S. Navy. The fact that 2 F-16s belonging to the Venezuelan Air Force flew over or near the U.S. destroyer on 2 consecutive days came close to crossing the red line in terms of maritime engagement rules. Moreover, the second pass took place less than 24 hours after the first, and the altitude and route data were noteworthy. The Pentagon described this maneuver as dangerous and unpredictable. Trump later warned Venezuela that if ship commanders believed their vessels were under threat, the U.S. military had the authority to shoot down the jets, stating, "If they put us in a dangerous situation, they will be shot down." The U.S. side publicly used the term provocative and reminded commanders of the step-by-step de-escalation procedure during close contacts. The destroyer does not have the capability to launch aircraft because it does not carry organic air power. Therefore, the reaction was carried out with support from official air defense circuits and regional air bases. The message was twofold. We are pushing back and keeping records. Such close flights lead to the clogging of radar and electro-optical detection chains, an increase in human factor errors, and the risk of unwanted escalation. Even a sudden maneuver by an aircraft can be perceived as a close threat by naval assets. The language Washington has chosen at this point aims to maintain deterrence and prevent a spark. Caracas appears caught between the need to make a show for its domestic audience and risk management on the external front. This balance cannot be sustained for long. Either military protocol will be activated, or politics will cool the situation. The U.S. must have anticipated this, as it prefers to keep both its fighter jets and warships on alert in the region in response to Venezuela's air maneuvers. The air picture is now changing not only on radar screens but also in unseen areas. Of course, the reason for this change is the arrival of U.S. fighter jets in the region in recent days. The U.S.'s deployment of 10 F-35s to the Caribbean axis has brought its strike capability to the region. Fifth-generation aircraft are valuable not only for attack, but also for their network-centric intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance capabilities. F-35s can establish a multi-layered sensor cloud with ship and land-based systems. This structure reduces tactical surprise by pinning even small targets maneuvering at sea to the picture. When such a network is established, the entire force sees what a single aircraft sees. This broadens the planning window for cartel-targeted sea-to-land strikes. Symbolic deterrence rhetoric is thus strengthened not for rhetorical reasons, but for technical ones. Although the number of aircraft may seem limited, the visibility and decision cycle impact they create are significant. The entire chain of command in the region has the capacity to feed and utilize this data. In other words, the F-35s present a scenario that could, in a sense, be Maduro's nightmare. The Trump administration does not consider these moves sufficient. Therefore, the U.S. is still holding back the military capacity to establish a massive naval base in the Caribbean. While the number of U.S. ships stationed in the region hovers around 7 or 8, the task force includes more than 4,500 sailors and Marines. 7 or 8 warships have established a permanent patrol system in the region. The core of the task force consists of guided missile destroyers and amphibious elements. The more than 4,500 sailors represent an advanced forward-deployed rapid response package. It was also announced that a nuclear-powered attack submarine has been assigned to the region. This platform provides stealth and the ability to strike effectively from unexpected directions. The submarine also serves as a force multiplier for surface assets in intelligence and signal interception missions. The message in such a deployment is clear. We are ready for crisis management. We can control the escalation. At the same time, it shows the stick from the sea to all non-state actors in the region. It was also announced that this move keeps cartel-targeted options on the table. This whole picture, involving U.S. naval forces, contains not only a diplomatic, but also a military warning to Venezuela. All of these developments took place within a week, and tensions escalated rapidly. So what is Venezuela doing in response to these U.S. military plans? Caracas is not standing idle, but its options appear limited. Venezuela has taken steps to increase its visibility against the U.S. naval presence. As mentioned, the F-16 flyovers on 2 consecutive days were the first layer of this. However, Maduro's moves were not limited to this. Venezuelan defense authorities announced that they had accelerated patrol activities within coastal security and territorial waters. The number of naval assets and patrol hours along the Caribbean coast were increased. It was reported that coastal radar networks and the air surveillance chain had been placed on high alert. On land, an increase in the number of security forces was announced, particularly along the Colombian border. It was announced that a total of 15,000 personnel were participating in field operations on land and at sea. This number was packaged with a narrative based on internal security against cartels and smuggling routes. Decision-makers are trying to convey a message of toughness to the outside world and security at home in the same sentence. The militia card also came to the fore in Venezuela's crisis management discourse. The government referred to a nationwide volunteer militia preparedness capacity in the millions. This rhetoric is based on the idea of an auxiliary security ring complementing the regular army. Such a structure provides a numerical advantage in internal security and critical facility protection. However, due to deficiencies in training, logistics, and command and control, its combat effectiveness remains limited. The militia card carries the potential to generate costs and chaos rather than deterrence. It is also used to create a visible sentry effect around critical infrastructure in cities. This image reinforces the narrative of external threats internally. However, it does not replace professional forces or improve the quality of warfare. Therefore, Venezuela's emphasis on militias should be interpreted as a political and internal security-focused tool. So what do other countries think about this crisis in the Caribbean between the U.S. and Venezuela? Regional countries are balancing politics while watching the situation unfold. Neighboring capitals are concerned about the escalation of the crisis for economic and security reasons. Colombia has increased its military presence along its border and has taken a tougher stance against smuggling networks. Small island states in the Caribbean basin are demanding stability for maritime trade and energy logistics. Brazil and Mexico are calling for diplomatic channels to remain open. Cuba is using stronger rhetoric while maintaining a cautious profile on the ground. Most Caribbean states are concerned that open military confrontation would hurt tourism and trade revenues. Regional organizations view even the point operation dimension of the crisis, targeting cartels, as risky. This sensitivity increases the secondary effects in U.S. planning. Politics is imposing more constraints on planning than ever before. Amidst this climate of concern, the U.S. side believes it can restore everything to normal and remove the Maduro regime in Venezuela. The technical framework of the U.S. military moves is consistent with the limited strike doctrine. The target set focuses on the sea-air connection points of organized crime networks rather than the state army. Intelligence verification and legal basis take precedence in this approach. Sensitivity is maintained at a high level to reduce collateral damage and diplomatic costs. The network-centric capabilities of the latest F-35s are combined with the sensors of naval assets. This accelerates the target identification and tracking cycle. The operation is designed with a short-term and clear target list. The political message precedes military execution. The range is there, the will is there, but the narrow formula of purpose is preserved. This formula is a template tested in crisis control. But what if things deviate from the plan and go off the rails? The most risky issue is accidental escalation. Close flights and heavy maritime traffic can turn a small mistake into a major crisis. This is why engagement rules and radio procedures become critical. The U.S. side insists on applying the principles of visual identification and safety distance. Venezuela pilots complying with route and altitude discipline reduces the likelihood of accidental contact. Radar lock, illumination, and tailing behaviors are highly susceptible to misinterpretation. Therefore, the fine line between a message flight and a threat flight must be maintained. Otherwise, ship defense systems will be forced to react. A wrong decision made in a minute can trigger a crisis that will last for months. This risk scenario is a test of composure for both sides. The Venezuelan side believes it will not fail this test and that it can withstand the U.S. naval pressure. Venezuela's buildup along its coast guard and naval lines is an attempt at asymmetric defense against major naval powers. Small, fast boats, coastal radars, and coastal defense batteries crowd the nearshore area. This is to complicate the maneuvering of large ships and increase their cognitive load. However, this model is vulnerable to electronic warfare and network-centric intelligence. Broadband jamming, false target generation, and link disruption techniques disrupt the coordination of small platforms. Furthermore, sonar and AIS manipulation complicates maritime traffic tracking, but also complicates your own logistics. Oil and port infrastructure near coastal cities fall into the category of civilian-sensitive targets and become difficult to protect. Therefore, asymmetric density alone is not sufficient. Training, discipline, and joint engagement are essential. Otherwise, it becomes a burden rather than an advantage against a large, organized force. On the other hand, the political framework of the crisis is as decisive as its military aspect. Washington does not frame this crisis solely as a fight against the trade in prohibited substances. The discourse of regional order and maritime security also comes to the fore. This stance seeks to strengthen its legitimacy in the eyes of the countries in the region. At the same time, it produces an antidote to the discourse of third countries, especially Russia and China. Moscow continues to present Washington's military presence in the Caribbean as a reflection of hegemony. Beijing, meanwhile, repeats its patterns of principled sovereignty and non-interference in internal affairs. The goal of this rhetoric is to increase the sense of hesitation among regional capitals. However, the concrete need for maritime security is pushing actors on the ground toward cautious cooperation. Political and security pragmatism push each other in this fragile balance. So, could the crisis between the U.S. and Venezuela in the future reach a level that could affect Russia and China, and even other countries around the world, much more deeply? Possible future scenarios fall under three headings. The first scenario is deterrence without escalation. The U.S. could continue its show of force and intensive patrols, while limited or postponed strike plans against cartel targets could be put on hold, depending on intelligence thresholds. The second scenario is precision strikes. Short-term, narrowly targeted, evidence-based attacks could be carried out, followed by a withdrawal mode accompanied by a political message. The third scenario is accidental escalation. An incident such as a close flyby or a collision at sea could inadvertently trigger a widening crisis. This last scenario, as mentioned, carries the highest cost for both sides. Because the regional economy and maritime trade are affected in the first way,